Hey guys, it's Miss Mahler here. We are going to start chapter 4 for the last couple weeks of school. I know that everyone is super ready to be done, but just bear with me. We have a couple more weeks left. Just keep on trying. I promise we will be done soon. So for chapter 4, we're going to be looking at rational numbers. And as you can see from the picture, these are things like fractions. So let's talk more about rational numbers. A rational number is a number that can be expressed as a ratio of two integers written as a fraction in which the denominator is not 0. So really what that means, a rational number is a number that can be written as a fraction, decimal, or percent. Rational numbers also include whole numbers and integers, and these can be positive or negative. Most of the numbers that people use in everyday life are rational numbers. Now, if you look at the bottom, I have what an irrational number is. An example of an irrational number is pi. So pi is equal to 3.141596162, blah, 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 a million more numbers. It is never ending. So this is considered an irrational number because it is a repeating decimal. Other repeating decimals are also considered irrational numbers. But we don't really need to worry about that right now because we're going to be talking about rational numbers. Some things that we're going to be seeing in this lesson are like and unlike fractions. What's the difference? So first, let's take a look at like fractions. These fractions have the same denominator. So the denominator, once again, is the number on the bottom. I have that little picture below here. So the denominator is the bottom number. It is a like fraction if the bottom numbers are the same. If the fractions have different denominators, they are considered unlike fractions. And I put these emojis here because this is the way that I like to remember like and unlike. If the fractions are the same, that means they like each other. They have the same numbers. Think about like your friends. You usually have a lot of things in common. So if your friends like the same things, you are like fractions. You're like friends. Now, if we look at the unlike fractions, I put the little broken heart emoji because these fractions do not like each other. They are different numbers on the bottom, and they're just too different that they don't even want to try to like each other. So that's why we consider them unlike fractions. So the first lesson that we're going to talk about in this chapter is lesson 3. Now I know you guys are probably looking at this like, wait, why are we starting with lesson 3? It's because lessons 1 and 2 really don't teach us much. They just kind of talk about decimals and fractions in general. So the stuff that we're going to be talking about starts in lesson 3. So first we're going to learn how to add and subtract like fractions. This can be found in your textbook on page 283 to 289. So to add and subtract like fractions, add or subtract the numerators and write the result over the denominator. So let's take a look at the add side first. So we're going to add the numerators, which are the top numbers. So 5 plus 2 equals 7. And then we're going to write that over the denominator. So keep the denominator the same. That'll still stay 9. And your answer is 7/9. If we take a look at the next adding example, -3/5 plus -1/5. Once again, we are going to add the numerators together. So -3 plus -1 equals -4. Put that over the same denominator, so that'll stay 5. And your answer is -4/5. Let's look at how to subtract like fractions. So once again, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to subtract the numerators. 5 minus 7 equals -2. And then we're going to write everything over the denominator, which is 8. So our answer is -2/8. but of course we always need to simplify when we're working with fractions. So we'll simplify that, and that will turn into -1/4. Let's look at the last example. -5/8 minus 3/8. Once again, we're going to subtract the numerators. So -5 minus 3. Look what they did there. They changed the minus to a plus and made the 3 a -3. If you remember back from the beginning of the year, this is keep, change, flip. Whenever you are subtracting integers, keep the first number the same, change the sign in the middle to the opposite, and flip the last number. So if it was positive, it's going to become negative. So here we have -5 plus -3. Add those together and you will get -8. Put that over your denominator, which is 8. And then we have our answer, -8/8. But once again, we can simplify that. -8/8 is also equal to -1. Whenever the number on the top and the bottom match, it equals 1 whole. Let's do some of these practice problems together. Now these are all like fractions, so remember we just need to add or subtract the numerators and keep the denominators the same. Letter A, 1/3 plus 2/3. So we're going to add the numerators. So add 1 plus 2. 1 plus 2 equals 3. And we're going to put that over the same denominator. So the answer is going to be 3/3, but of course we can simplify that because whenever the top number and the bottom number is the same, it means it's equal to 1 whole. So our answer for letter A is 1. Letter B, -3/7 plus 1/7. So once again, we're going to add the numerators. So -3 plus 1. Add those together and you will get -2. Put everything over the same denominator, and that is the answer for letter B, -2/7. Letter F, 5/9 minus 2/9. Once again, we're going to subtract the numerators. 5 minus 2, and that equals 3. Put everything over the same denominator, which is 9. So there's our answer, but we can simplify it. To simplify this fraction, we're going to divide both the top and the bottom by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So the answer for letter F is 1/3. Letter G, -5/9 minus 2/9. So we're going to start by subtracting our numerators. -5 minus 2. But as you can see, whenever we subtract integers, we need to do keep, change, flip. So we're going to keep -5 the same. We're going to change the minus in the middle to a plus. And your +2 will become -2. Now we can add those together. -5 plus -2 equals -7. Put that over your same denominator, which is 9, and there's your answer, -7/9. Now it's your turn to practice. For assignment 1 this week, I want you to complete the even numbers on the like fractions worksheet. So there's really only 5 questions since you guys are only doing the even numbers. Let's move on to lesson 4, add and subtract unlike fractions. This can be found in your textbook on page 291 to 297. Now remember, unlike fractions have different denominators. So in order to add or subtract unlike fractions, you need to rename the fractions using the least common denominator, or LCD. Then you're going to add or subtract as with like fractions, and if necessary, simplify the sum or difference. So let's review what a common denominator is. A common denominator is a common multiple of the denominators of two or more fractions. The least common denominator, or LCD, is the LCM, or least common multiple, of the denominators. You can use the LCD to compare fractions. You can also use a number line. So now we're going to review how to find the least common denominator. And yes, we have done this year. So the first step would be to go through all of the multiples of the first denominator. So if you look at the fractions at the bottom, starting with 1/3, we're going to list all of the multiples of 3 because that is the first denominator. So 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 5 is 15, 3 times 6 is 18, 3 times 7 is 21, and we could be here all day if we wanted to. We can keep going and going and going, but we'll stop. So the rule of thumb that I like to use is go about maybe 5 numbers. If you still can't find the LCD, then keep going, but I think 5 should be about good. So step 2 would be to go through all the multiples of the second denominator. So as you can see below, 1/6, we're going to list all the multiples of 6. 6 times 1 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12, 6 times 3 is 18, 6 times 4 is 24. And you can keep on going and going and going if you really, really wanted to, but we'll stop right there because I see a number that they have in common. So for step 3, we are going to find the smallest multiple that is the same in both. And once again, we have done this in class before. So if you'd like, you can go through and underline all of the numbers that are the same. But this time, we're going to find the smallest number that is the same. So in this case, the 6's are the smallest number that they have in common. That means the least common denominator is 6. After you find the least common denominator, rename the fractions as like fractions. So to do this, step 1, you're going to multiply each fraction to make the denominators the same. So since we already found the LCD as 6, our new fraction needs to have 6 in the denominator. So in order to get from 3 to 6, we multiplied by 2. Step 2, whatever you multiplied on the bottom, multiply on the top. So since we multiplied by 2 on the bottom, we're going to do times 2 on the top as well. So 1 times 2 is 2, and then there's our new fraction, 2/6. If we do the one below, 1/6, once again, our denominator needs to be the LCD, which we already figured out was 6. We did 6 times 1 in order to get 6. And then whatever number we multiplied on the bottom, we have to multiply on the top. 1 times 1 is 1, so your new fraction is 1/6. So now we're ready to move on to the next step, now that we have renamed our fractions as like fractions. Now that they are like fractions, we can add or subtract them, just like we did in the previous lesson. And remember, always simplify your answer. So 2/6 minus 1/6 equals 1/6, and 2/6 plus 1/6 equals 3/6. But we can simplify that. To do that, we're going to divide both the top and the bottom by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So there's your answer, 1/2. Let's try some of these practice problems together. Letter A, 1/6 plus 2/3. So first we need to go through and find all of the multiples of our denominators. So we'll do the multiples of 6 first. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 4 is 24. And 6 times 5 is 30. Like I said, you can go about 5. Some of these you don't have to go that many, but I think 5 is a good number. Now let's do all the multiples for our other denominator, 3. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. And 3 times 5 is 15. Now that we went through and found all the multiples for our denominators, we need to find and circle the least common denominator. So we can start by just underlining all the numbers that are the same. So 6 and 12. Now we need to look for the smallest or the least number. So the smallest is 6. So 6 is going to be our least common denominator, or LCD. Now we need to turn our fractions into like fractions next. So since the first fraction already has the denominator 6, we can leave it alone. But our second fraction, 2/3, we need to change it so that the denominator is equal to 6. So we did 3 times 2 to get 6. Whatever number you multiply on the bottom, you have to multiply on the top. So we're going to do times 2 on the top as well. And that will give us 4/6. Now that we have like fractions, we can add them together. And I'm just going to rewrite it up here. So 1/6 plus 4/6. And add the numerators together to get 5. Put it over the same denominator. There's the answer, 5/6. Let's try letter B, 9/10 plus -1/2. So once again, we need to start off by finding the least common denominator because these are unlike fractions. So we'll go through the multiples of 10 first. 10 times 1 is 10. 10 times 2 is 20. 10 times 3 is 30. Now I'm just going to stop after 3 because I know that we're not going to need any number bigger than that. Let's go through and do our multiples for 2 next. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 5 is 10. Now that we went through and found our multiples, we need to circle the least common denominator. So the numbers that we have in common, I see, are 10, and that is actually the least common denominator. So we need to rewrite both fractions so that the denominators are 10. Now 9/10 already has that denominator, so we can leave it alone. But we need to change -1/2 in order to make the denominator 10. So to get from 2 to 10, we multiplied times 5. Whatever we multiply on the bottom, we have to multiply on the top. So -1 times 5 is -5. So our new fraction is going to be -5/10. I'm going to rewrite this above so that way we can add our new fractions together. 9 plus -5 equals 4. Put that over your denominator, which is 10. We can simplify this fraction by dividing both the top and the bottom by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. The answer for letter B is 2/5. Let's try letter G, 5/8 minus 1/4. So since these are unlike fractions, we need to find the least common denominator first. Let's go through and find all of the multiples for 8. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. And we can do our multiples for 4. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 5 is 20. Now we can go through and find the least common denominator. So the smallest number is 8. We need to make both denominators 8. Since the first fraction already has the denominator 8, we can leave 5/8 alone. But we need to change 1/4 to make sure our denominator is 8. So to get from 4 to 8, we multiplied by 2. Whatever you multiply on the bottom, multiply on the top. 1 times 2 equals 2. So your new fraction is going to be 2/8. I'm going to rewrite them up at the top. And now we can subtract since they are now like fractions. Subtract your numerators. 5 minus 2 equals 3. Put it over the same denominator. And there's your answer for G, 3/8. Letter H, 3/4 minus 1/3. Once again, we need to find the least common denominator because these are unlike fractions. So we'll write out the multiples for 4. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16. Now let's do the multiples for 3. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 5 is 15. Now we need to look for the least common denominator. So the smallest number that these two numbers have in common is 12. We need to rewrite both fractions to make sure the denominators are now going to be 12. So to get from 4 to 12, we multiplied by 3. Whatever you do to the bottom number, you have to do to the top number. And 3 times 3 equals 9. So the first fraction is going to turn into 9/12. Let's rewrite 1/3 with the new denominator. So to get from 3 to 12, we did times 4. Whatever you multiplied on the bottom, you have to multiply on top. 1 times 4 equals 4. So the new fraction is going to be 4/12. And I'm going to write that up on the top as well. Now that we have like fractions, we can subtract them easily. 9 minus 4 equals 5. Put that over 12. That is your answer, 5/12. Now, I know that seems like a lot, but it is something that you guys have done already, and it is very, very easy once you have like fractions. So don't give up. Like I said, you only need to do about 5 multiples or less before you see the least common denominator. So don't stress out. So for your assignment this week, assignment number 2, you're going to complete the even numbers on the unlike fractions worksheet. For the last thing we're going to be talking about this week is lesson 5, add and subtract mixed numbers. This can be found on page 299 to 305. To add or subtract mixed numbers, first add or subtract the fractions. So if necessary, rename them using the LCD like we just did, then add or subtract the whole numbers and simplify if necessary. Sometimes when you subtract mixed numbers, the fraction in the first number is less than the fraction in the second mixed number. In this case, rename one or both fractions in order to subtract. So I summed this all up for you guys in 4 easy steps. So number 1, look to see if they are like fractions. If they are, you're just going to add and subtract the numerators like you normally would. Number 2, if they are unlike fractions, you need to rename them using the least common denominator. Then you'll add and subtract the numerators as normal. Step 3, after adding or subtracting the fractions, you're going to go back and do the same thing to the whole numbers. Step 4, if the fractions cannot be subtracted, you need to make them both improper fractions, and then you can continue to solve. So I know this is a lot of words right now, but I think it's going to be a lot easier for you guys to see once we start doing the problems. So let's review how to create an improper fraction. Step 1, you're going to multiply the denominator and the whole number. Step 2, add the numerator to that. Step 3, put your new number over the original denominator. So let's look at the example below and we'll kind of talk through all these things. So we were turning 2 1/3 into an improper fraction. So we multiplied the denominator, which was 3, times the whole number, which was 2. 3 times 2 is 6. Then we added the numerator, so plus 1, and that gave us 7. Then we're going to put the new number over the original denominator, which was 3. So your new improper fraction is 7/3. We can do this as well for the number on the bottom, 1 2/3. Once again, we're going to multiply the denominator, which was 3, times the whole number, which was 1. So 3 times 1 was 3. Then we're going to add the numerator, plus 2 more. 3 plus 2 is 5. And then put the new number over the original denominator. So put that over 3. So now we have 7/3 and 5/3. Now that we have the same fractions, we can go ahead and subtract them. And that will give us 2/3 for the answer. All right, let's do some practice problems and work through some of these together. Letter A, 6 1/8 plus 2 5/8. So this is easy because they're like fractions. If they're like fractions, you're just going to add the numerators together. 1 plus 5 equals 6. We're going to put it over the same denominator. And then we can add the whole numbers. 6 plus 2 equals 8. So there's the answer, but we can simplify it. To simplify, we can divide both the top number and the bottom number by 2. Leave the whole number alone. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And bring down your whole number 8. Remember, leave that one alone. There's the answer for letter A, 8 3/4. Let's look at letter B. This is going to get a little bit more tricky because this one has unlike fractions. The denominators are different. So first, let's rewrite these as improper fractions. To do that, we're going to multiply the denominator times the whole number. So 5 times 5 is 25. Then we need to add the numerator. So plus 1 more equals 26. And we're going to put that over our same denominator, which was 5. Next, we need to do the same thing to the other fraction. So multiply the denominator times your whole number. 2 times 10 is 20. Add your numerator to it, and you'll get 23. Put that over your same denominator. Now, we still can't add these together because they still have different denominators. One is 5 and one is 10. So let's go through and find the least common denominator for both of these numbers. We'll go through and do the multiples of 5 first. 1 times 5 is 5. 2 times 5 is 10. And 3 times 5 is 15. So right now, I already see a denominator that matches our other denominator. So I'm going to circle the 10. I need to convert the first fraction to make the denominator 10. In order to get from 5 to 10, we multiplied times 2. Whatever you do on the bottom, you have to do on the top. 26 times 2 equals 54. So now that we have like fractions, I'm just going to rewrite them up on the top here. And we can add them together. So 54 plus 23 equals 77. And put it over the same denominator. Now for the final answer, we need to simplify or turn it back into a mixed number. To do this, you're going to divide the top number divided by the bottom number. So 77 divided by 10 gives us 7 with 7 left over. So we're going to put the leftover part over our denominator, which is 10. And there's the answer for letter B, 7 and 7/10. Let's move on to letter G next. 7 minus 1 and 1/2. Now, I'm sure you're looking at the 7 and you're like, oh, this is going to be really easy. But first, we need to write the 7 as a fraction. Now, we know when the fraction has the same top number and same bottom number, it is equal to 1 whole. So, for example, if we wanted to make 1 whole using our denominator, which is 2, 1 whole would be equal to 2 over 2. Now, I'm going to represent 7 as 2 over 2. There's one of them. And 6. The reason why I'm going to do that is because we need a fraction in order to subtract. But we still want it to represent 7 wholes. So that's why I wrote the 2 over 2 fraction, because that represents 1. And then the whole number 6 represents 6, obviously. So 6 and 1 makes 7. I know it looks tricky, but just try to make the whole numbers into a fraction. So now that we did that, we have like fractions. So what we're going to do, we're going to subtract the fraction parts first. So let's subtract the numerators. 2 minus 1 equals 1. We're going to put that over our same denominator, which was 2. Then we're going to subtract the whole numbers. 6 minus 1 equals 5. And there's our answer, 5 and 1/2. All right, let's try this last one. Letter H, 5 and 3/8 minus 4 and 11/12. So first, let's rewrite the fractions as improper fractions. To do this, we're going to multiply the denominator times the whole number. 8 times 5 equals 40. Add the numerator, so add 3 more, and you will get 43. Put it over the same denominator, which was 8. Now we need to make 4 and 11/12 into an improper fraction. So multiply the denominator times your whole number. 12 times 4 equals 48. And then add the numerator. So add 11 to that. 48 plus 11 equals 59. Put that over your denominator, 12. Now that we've turned them into improper fractions, we need to find the least common denominator before we can actually subtract them. So let's find the least common denominator for 8 first. Go through all the multiples of 8. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. Let's go through the multiples of 12. 12 times 1 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. 12 times 3 is 36. All right, so I see a least common denominator, and that is 24. Now we need to convert our fractions so that they have the same denominators. So we'll do the first one first. So to get from 8 to 24, we multiplied by 3. Whatever you do to the bottom number, you have to do to the top number. 43 times 3 equals 129. Let's convert the other fraction. So to get from 12 to 24, you multiplied times 2. Whatever you do to the bottom number, you have to do to the top number. 59 times 2 equals 118. Now that we have our new fractions, and I know they're very big numbers, I'm just going to rewrite them up at the top here. We can now subtract them because they are like fractions. 129 minus 118 equals 11. And we're going to put that over our denominator, which is 24. And that is the answer for letter H, 11 over 24. Once again, I know this seems like a lot of steps, but the more you practice, the easier this will get. If you'd like some extra practice activities, you can look in the textbook from pages 283 to page 305. You can also go back to your assignments and complete the odd number problems, since this week I'm only checking the even numbers. These are all optional, but I highly encourage you guys to go back and practice these things, because this is what you're going to start with at the beginning of 8th grade. So it's important that we learn it now, so that way we are not trying to learn it again next year.